You have watched yourself over and over navigate difficult experiences. And in doing that, you start to realize nothing can knock me down. Nothing can take me out of the game. Nothing is so hard that it causes me to give up and stop. And that knowing is what helps you feel like you can handle anything. Welcome to The Art of Speaking Up, a podcast that helps professional women access the limitless potential that lies within them. I'm your host, Jessica Guzik, and my mission is to help you find that spark inside you that has the power to transform your career in ways you may not have thought possible. I'm so excited that you're here. And now, on to the show. Welcome to the Art of Speaking Up podcast. I am excited for today's episode because we are talking about how to find your voice and speak up powerfully at work, which is so important if you are someone who wants to be seen as a leader and who wants to advance upwards within your organization. Your voice, your participation in meetings, the way that you speak, these are all ways that you show your boss and you show the leaders at your company that you are capable of handling bigger things and that you are someone who can be trusted to move into higher levels of leadership. Now, for today's episode, I am going to be talking about some of the biggest obstacles that I see getting in the way of speaking up and having a voice at work. And I titled this episode, The Hidden Obstacles That Get in the Way, because what I see very often is that it's really easy to get overly focused on the tactics of speaking up and to focus on things like learning tools and frameworks and asking yourself, how do I say this? How do I say that? What's the best way to express myself? And while those things are incredibly valuable and important, I do see a lot of people staying stuck because they are ignoring that deeper emotional layer that is getting in the way of them speaking up and having a strong voice at work. At its core, speaking up is an emotional experience. It makes us feel things. And often the emotions that it makes us feel can be challenging and uncomfortable. This is what makes speaking up so hard. But the good news is, if we know what is making it hard, then we are on the correct path to solving those obstacles. And that's exactly what today's episode is about. In today's episode, I'm going to be teaching you about the emotional obstacles that can make it hard to speak up and hard for you to have a voice at work. And I'm also going to equip you with tools and a deeper understanding of how to navigate through those emotional obstacles. First, I'll provide a super high-level overview of the three big types of emotional obstacles that make speaking up difficult. And then I'm going to explain to you how to cope with those emotional obstacles in a healthy, productive way that helps you find your voice, build real confidence, develop emotional resilience, and become that strong, capable leader that you want to be. So without further ado, let's dive in. I want to start by talking about the three types of emotional obstacles that make speaking up so challenging. They are, number one, the emotional experience of uncertainty. Number two, the emotional experience of facing judgment from others. And number three, the emotional experience of facing our own flaws and imperfections. I have a lot to dig into, so I'm going to start with the first one, which is facing the emotional experience of uncertainty. Speaking up is something that is inherently uncertain. When we open our mouths to speak, we don't know exactly what is going to come out of our mouths. We have an idea of what we want to express, but there's a level of surrender that has to happen when we open our mouths and actually begin talking, because we don't know the exact words that are going to come out of our mouth, and we don't know the exact way that we are going to express our idea. This creates uncertainty. And if you've ever found yourself sitting in a meeting and having thoughts like, I want to share this idea, but I don't know how to express it, or I want to share this idea, but I'm scared to speak because what if it comes out poorly? If you've ever had those types of thoughts, that is you grappling with uncertainty. That is you being in the very difficult emotional experience of not knowing how the words are going to come out of your mouth. Uncertainty is a very challenging emotion for us humans to experience. We like to know how things are going to go. We like to be able to predict what is going to happen next. So when we are in a situation where we don't know how things are going to go and we can't predict what is going to happen next, and on top of that, the way that we express ourselves is going to impact our profession and our reputation and our livelihood, that experience can be very emotionally overwhelming. This is why so often we choose not to speak up. We choose to stay silent in the room, because if we're silent, then we don't have to face the uncertainty. We are not going to speak up. Therefore, we don't have to experience that emotional tension that comes when we realize we can't predict or control exactly how the words will come out of our mouth. So that is the first emotional obstacle to speaking up. The second emotional obstacle to speaking up is the emotional experience of facing judgment from others. So when we share our thoughts, our ideas, our intellect, we are putting a piece of ourselves out into the world for other people to respond to, which means other people might have thoughts and judgments and criticisms about us and what we're saying and about our intellect. And when you speak about work, you are automatically exposed to that. Every time you share a suggestion or an idea, you have put something out there for other people to judge and evaluate. That can feel incredibly emotionally vulnerable. It is so difficult to sit with the experience of wondering whether people think you're smart, whether people are judging you, whether the idea that you shared is too simple or basic or obvious. And if you've ever spoken up in a meeting and then immediately experienced a vulnerability hangover where you were wondering if people thought it was good enough or if people thought it was smart, then this is an example of you grappling with the emotional experience of facing judgment from others. Now, the final emotional obstacle to speaking up is the emotional experience of facing our own flaws and imperfections. This is so important. No matter how good you get at communicating, and no matter how confident you become, speaking is an inherently imperfect activity. Even the most skilled speakers will fumble and make mistakes and have moments where they stutter or stumble or get stuck. This is actually a very normal thing. But when it happens to us, it can elicit really intense emotions. A lot of us, and especially the women who are attracted to my work, and I know this is something that I've grappled with throughout my own journey, a lot of us hold the fantasy of being perfect. And that fantasy includes speaking perfectly, getting every word perfect, never having a fumble, never revealing to people around us that we are flawed humans. Now, the problem is this is an impossible goal. It's literally not possible to speak perfectly, which means when we do speak, we are exposed to the emotional experience of facing our own imperfections. This can elicit feelings of shame, embarrassment, humiliation, regret. And if you've ever spoken up and made a mistake or fumbled your words or said something incorrect and then felt a flood of regret and overwhelm as soon as that happened, then you have experienced the emotional obstacle of facing your own flaws and imperfections. Now, when you zoom out and you look at these three emotional obstacles, facing uncertainty, facing judgment from others, and facing your own flaws and imperfections, it is no wonder speaking up is challenging. Each of these on its own is a sizable emotional obstacle. And then when you reflect on the fact that in speaking up, you are facing all three of these at once, it makes a ton of sense that speaking up is challenging and that it requires internal growth to learn to feel comfortable and confident putting your voice out there for other people to respond to. So, what I want to do for the remainder of today's episode is I want to walk you through the process of learning to cope with these emotional obstacles and not just cope with them, but use them to become stronger. Because the thing about emotional obstacles is even though they are hard and not always fun and often uncomfortable, they are also the thing that makes us strong, confident, and unstoppable. It is like a two-sided coin. The more challenging the emotional obstacle, the more confidence it can allow us to build. And I don't know about you, but when I hear that, I get very excited and I start to think to myself, bring it on. Bring on the obstacles, bring on the challenges, bring on the discomfort. If you are telling me that I'm going to feel unstoppable and badass as a result of learning to overcome that discomfort, then I am totally game to go on that journey. That's how I feel personally. That's why I love doing this work. And if you feel that way too, then the rest of this episode is really for you. It's all about learning to leverage these emotional challenges to become stronger and to become the voice, the woman, and the leader that you want to be. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to walk you through unhealthy ways or unproductive ways of navigating these emotional obstacles. And then I'm going to contrast that with how I recommend you navigate through these emotional obstacles. So let's talk about the unproductive ways of navigating through these experiences. And by the way, if you identify with any of these, please don't judge yourself. We are talking about some of the most difficult levels of inner emotional and psychological work. And so the fact that you're even listening to this episode and doing this self-inquiry is already such a beautiful step forward. So with that in mind, as you're listening, please remember this is a judgment-free zone. This podcast is always a judgment-free zone. Okay, so the not so productive ways of dealing with these challenging emotional experiences usually falls into one of two buckets. I see people either underperforming or overperforming. So let me explain what each of those means. Underperforming is when you underperform, aka you don't speak up. You don't participate in the discussion. You don't offer thoughts and suggestions. You're not a voice in the room. I call this underperforming because you are under-indexing relative to the full potential and the full voice that you could be bringing into the room. Now, when you don't speak up and you don't participate, you get to experience the temporary relief of avoiding the three emotional obstacles that I laid out earlier in this episode. However, there are also consequences to that choice. Typically, if you don't speak up, not only do you miss the opportunity to develop your reputation as a leader, But also, you miss the opportunity to grow your confidence. Your confidence grows as you see yourself showing up big, bold, brave. And when you don't speak up, you deprive yourself of those opportunities to grow your confidence. And so, underperforming typically results in plateauing and feelings of stuckness, both in terms of your actual progression within your company and in terms of your inner emotional state and your confidence levels. So that is what underperforming looks like. Now let's talk about overperforming. This is the opposite. Overperforming is when you say to yourself, if I can just get it perfectly, if I can just get the words right, if I just say the most polished, wonderful, perfect thing, then it will come out great. I will sound amazing, and I won't have to experience any of these yucky emotions. And we think to ourselves that getting the words right will get us out of the uncertainty because we know exactly what the words are going to sound like. It'll get us out of facing judgment from other people because we're going to say it so smart and so perfect that other people are going to think we're brilliant and amazing. And we can get out of the experience of facing our own flaws and imperfections because if we get it perfectly, there will be no flaws and imperfections. So our logic in that situation is essentially, if I do this perfectly, I will get to skip over all of the difficult emotions. Typically, this results in behaviors like over-preparing, spending too much time planning what you're going to say, getting stuck in your head, trying to script things before you speak. Now, if you've fallen into any of these patterns, then you know some of the downsides of these behaviors. Number one, this is very exhausting. Chronic over-preparation, chronic scripting in your head is draining. It takes up time, it takes up energy, it prevents you from being present. But I think what's even more important to point out is that this level of overperforming doesn't actually make the yucky emotions go away. It's a hope, it's a desire that we have. We want the over-preparing to make the feelings go away. But typically, at best, it reduces the feelings marginally, but it never quite eliminates them. Now, both of these contrasting approaches, underperforming and overperforming, are actually two variations of the same exact coping mechanism, which is avoidance. Avoidance is when we avoid something. Now, both of these patterns are avoiding the uncomfortable emotions. They're just doing so in different ways. Underperforming is avoiding the uncomfortable emotions by not speaking up at all. And overperforming is avoiding the uncomfortable emotions by attempting to speak up perfectly. At its core, both of these behaviors are trying to accomplish the same thing, which is to make sure that we don't experience those difficult, uncomfortable feelings. Now, avoidance is tempting, but I want to try to show you why it is worth it to break your pattern of avoidance. There are two big issues that avoidance creates in our lives and in our careers. Number one, this is the more obvious one. It prevents us from freely taking the actions that we know we need to take to create the success we want to create. It's pretty straightforward, right? If we avoid speaking up because of the emotions that it elicits, we are also avoiding taking the actions that will get us ahead professionally. But there is a second issue, which is actually far more important, and it's one that a lot of people are not aware of. When we avoid challenging emotions, we don't develop the internal ability to cope with those emotions. We cannot learn to cope with something if we are avoiding it. So, a great analogy to help us explore this idea together is to think about someone who wants to get physically strong, but also wants to avoid ever feeling physically strained in the gym. This person is going to have a very difficult time building muscle if they are avoiding the feeling of being physically strained. Now, what I want to offer is that confidence is just like building a muscle. It's a psychological muscle. And just like we need to feel some amount of strain in order to build our actual muscles in the gym, we also need to experience some amount of strain in order to build the psychological muscle of confidence, which means that when we fall into these avoidance patterns, we are depriving ourselves of the confidence that we could be building by facing these challenging emotions and quote unquote straining ourselves psychologically. So I really want you to think about it as physical strain builds strong muscles, psychological strain builds strong confidence. That's why it is so important to unwind patterns of avoidance. When we face the difficult feelings head on and we learn to cope with them and navigate through them, then we start building the psychological strength that we need to feel confident. Now, just like you can injure yourself in the gym if you don't know how to safely strain your muscles, we can also injure ourselves psychologically if we don't know how to safely strain ourselves at an emotional and psychological level. And I think this is where people get really lost and really confused in their growth process. It's as if you're going to the gym and you're doing tons of exercises, but you don't actually know much about personal training and about form and about volume and about weight and about reps. So you could do all this work in the gym and you could actually cause harm to your body. And the same thing can happen psychologically. You can listen to podcasts and do affirmations and you can journal and you can engage in self-help and all kinds of things. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are on the correct path to building confidence. That is why I feel so passionate about sharing my message and supporting my clients, because this deeper confidence that we're trying to build and this level of internal strength isn't just something that we can do overnight. It's not just something that's like a simple 1, 2, 3 step process. It's something that requires thoughtfulness and care and strategy, but it's worth it because when we have that infrastructure and we have that proper scaffolding to help us engage in the process productively, then what ends up happening is these emotionally uncomfortable experiences begin to make us stronger. And not only do you start speaking up more and having a voice in the room, but you start feeling really strong and badass inside. You start feeling like the type of person who isn't intimidated because she knows she can handle anything. Now, I don't know about you, but that's who I want to be. I want to be the type of person that is like, this can get messy. This can get hard. This can fall off the rails. I will be fine. Now, if that's appealing to you and you want to become the type of person who is capable of navigating through difficult emotional experiences and who doesn't have to rely on avoidance and who can do the hard things and be strong, even when circumstances are challenging, then I want to walk you through a few principles that will help you along your journey. So going back to the gym analogy, this is me giving you tips on how to have proper form and how to structure a proper workout routine so you don't end up wasting your time in the gym or even worse, injuring yourself. And everything that I'm about to share with you is all based on the work I do with my clients. These are the principles that I build into my program because these are the principles that support real, lasting psychological growth. So, the first tip that I'm going to share with you is you have to get your priorities settled. The thing that I see trip people up is that they have competing priorities, and those priorities are sabotaging their progress. Typically, the competing priorities that we have, and we all do this as humans, this is totally normal, but we say to ourselves, I want to be strong and confident and unstoppable. And then we also say to ourselves, and I want to always be comfortable and never take risks and never do anything scary. Those two goals are not compatible with one another. If we want to grow and stretch ourselves and become someone who is bolder and stronger, we are going to have to take risks and we are going to have to be uncomfortable. And one of the best things that you can do to guarantee your success is make a conscious decision around that trade-off. Ask yourself, is it worth it to me to take some risk and feel uncomfortable and take some scary leaps and scary actions in order to become the version of me who I want to be? And whether you pick no or you pick yes, be firm in that answer. Commit to that answer. Sell yourself on why that is your answer. The reason it's so important to sell yourself on it is because your brain's going to try to renegotiate it at every step of the way. As soon as we decide once that we are willing to get uncomfortable so that we can grow, our brain is going to do everything it can to convince us to reverse that decision. That's why you may have experienced this emotional roller coaster of waking up at the start of the day and thinking, today's the day I'm committed. Today's the day I'm going to show up confident. Today's the day I'm going to speak up. And you go into your day with a real, sincere intention of showing up strong. And then the minute you drop into a meeting, you completely renege on that promise. You drop the commitment. You say to yourself, not today, tomorrow, today it feels too hard. This is why when I work with my clients, I work with them for a prolonged period of time because I know that they're going to wrestle with this back and forth. Just because someone starts a growth process doesn't mean their brain is going to magically stop arguing with them. The good news is if we're committed and we keep recommitting and we allow ourselves enough time and enough iterations and enough attempts to finally break that back and forth cycle, eventually we will be able to break through and speak up powerfully and take that bold action, even if our brain tried to sabotage us in the moment. But it all starts with making a clear decision, deciding what matters most to you, prioritizing that, and then reprioritizing it at every step of the way. The second piece of advice that I want to share with you, this is so important, is to not make the mistake of going from avoidance to excessiveness. So a lot of times when you're stuck in avoidance, you're not speaking up, you realize that you want to make a change. A lot of times what can happen is we think that we need to swing the pendulum all the way to the other side, and we need to go from never speaking up to speaking up all of the time and challenging ourselves to speak up in the biggest, most uncomfortable situations. This strategy typically ends up causing more harm than good. The thing that actually helps you grow your confidence and your internal emotional strength is taking consistent, measured, doable steps. Remember, the whole point of today's episode is to help you be able to navigate these challenging emotional obstacles. And these emotions that you're trying to face and learn to cope with, they feel intense. These are intense psychological experiences. So if you're learning to be able to metabolize an intense psychological experience, you don't want to go and challenge yourself to metabolize a ton of it at once. You want to give yourself the opportunity to take cautious, strategic, measured steps that allow you to be exposed to the emotional discomfort, but in amounts that you can digest and amounts that you are able to tolerate. It is the compounding of those smaller steps that ends up building the big confidence. And so often we think big confidence is going to come from a big step. I have to do the biggest, scariest thing in order for me to build confidence in my voice and in my speaking up. And it's the opposite. And this is one of the other reasons why I work with my clients over a longer period of time, is because I don't want to rush them to take these huge, giant leaps right away. I actually want to encourage them to take smaller, measured steps that they can actually sustain, because those smaller, measured steps are what is going to lead to growth. I really want you to think about confidence as being built one brick at a time. You can't rush it. You can't stack 100 bricks at once. You just have to keep putting bricks on that wall and trust that eventually that proverbial wall will be built. So that is my second tip. My third tip, this is probably one of the most important things that I could ever share with you. And it's also something that I spent a great deal of time working with my clients on. And it's this: you have to learn how to separate I feel bad from I am bad. So as you practice speaking up and as you practice facing these uncomfortable emotions in a thoughtful, measured, strategic way, you are going to experience emotional discomfort. That is part of the process. Now, the thing that really trips people up and takes people out of the game and keeps people stuck is that when they have these uncomfortable emotional experiences, they feel judged, they feel vulnerable, they feel like their flaws and imperfections are exposed. When they experience the discomfort of that emotional experience becomes so intense that internally it morphs from I feel bad to I am bad. And something that happens often to us as humans is when something feels so bad and overwhelming inside of us, the only way that we know how to make sense of it is that we are bad. We think to ourselves, wow, this feels so bad. I feel shame. I feel embarrassed. I feel humiliated. I must be bad. How could I be good and feeling this bad? And a huge thing that will support you in the process is to remember that these emotions are normal human experiences. All humans, even great humans, experience these challenging emotions. And as you learn to separate the I feel bad from the I am bad, it becomes easier for you to challenge yourself and to build this emotional endurance, because now your self-worth is no longer taking a hit every time you feel emotionally uncomfortable. Now, listen, I know that what I'm sharing is hard stuff. This is not the easy stuff. This is the real work. But the good thing about the real work is that it is what actually works. The fluffy stuff, the feel-good stuff, the snap your fingers and you'll wake up confident stuff, I have never seen that stuff work. And I have been in this space coaching for 5 years. I've coached over 150 women. I have never seen the fast, flashy, snappy, hacky stuff work ever. I have only seen it keeping my clients stuck until they come work with me and do the less glamorous but real work, which helps them finally feel relief because they're finally making progress. So I know that it can be difficult to imagine that the path ahead of you involves you being willing to feel these uncomfortable emotions. But what I want to share with you is a quick glimpse of the version of you who you become when you are willing to learn to navigate discomfort, and when you're willing to make that pivot from avoidance to facing the challenging emotions head on. As you do that, not only do you get your voice out there more, and not only do you speak up more, but you start to feel unstoppable because you have watched yourself over and over navigate difficult experiences. And in doing that, you start to realize nothing can knock me down. Nothing can take me out of the game. Nothing is so hard that it causes me to give up and stop. And that knowing is what helps you feel like you can handle anything. And that feeling of I can handle anything, when it comes to growing your confidence and personal development, there is no better feeling. And the last thing that I want to say is that as you practice navigating these uncomfortable emotions, the emotions themselves become easier to navigate. So just like when you start a new regimen at the gym, the first few workouts feel brutal. Your muscles are sore. It's so intense. But then as you get in shape, your workouts are much more manageable. They're still hard. They're not a breeze, but you don't feel physically debilitated after. This emotional work is the same. In the beginning, when you haven't practiced it and you haven't committed to doing the work, the emotional experiences are brutal because psychologically you aren't quote unquote in shape. You haven't been doing the exercise to get internally stronger. But the more you do it, the more the emotional experiences start to feel like not such a big deal. Now, it's not that they feel like a breeze, right? Like when you're in shape, it's still challenging to work out. But the more in shape you are, the more you can handle the workout. And that's exactly what happens emotionally. The more that you do this inner work, the more you are able to handle the emotional strain without it feeling like this big thing that completely debilitates you. And ultimately, that is what helps you feel ready to play a bigger game in your career. It helps you feel fearless to step into that next role or move towards an executive position because your brain is no longer so scared of things getting hard. And your brain is no longer solving for, oh, shoot, I need to avoid hard things because they're uncomfortable. Now you have a brain that knows, hey, it's cool. If things get hard, I've got it because I've been proving to myself that I can do that all along. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. And the last thing that I'll share is if you want to build this level of emotional resilience and emotional strength, this is the work that I do with my clients. And I want to invite you to come work with me inside of my signature program, the Art of Speaking Up Academy. In this program, I guide you through the real inner psychological work that you need to do to learn to navigate these challenging emotions with grace and resilience so that you feel capable speaking up, even in high pressure, difficult situations. There is no better gift that you can give to yourself than learning to navigate difficult moments like a pro. Inside the Academy, I also teach you the foundations of executive communication so that you know how to sound crisp, polished, and persuasive when you do speak up and share your voice with everyone around you. To find out when the next cohort is enrolling, add yourself to the waitlist by clicking the link in the show notes or by going to jessguzikcoaching.com/academy. Don't skip the waitlist because once you join, you will be first to find out when you can enroll and you will qualify for exclusive waitlist-only bonuses, which I rotate, but sometimes the bonus is a free workshop. Sometimes it's a free one-on-one session with me. So you don't want to miss the bonus. To add yourself to the waitlist, click the link in the show notes, and I will catch you in next week's episode. Bye.